I know that this might look weird with me holding a mic in my hand and also having a lav mic on. I am testing out a new wireless microphone, so on the offhand chance that the audio sounds completely unusable because I have not played with any of the settings yet and it's just going to be a lot of trial and error, I will just use the lav mic audio, so pardon the extra presence now in my videos. Hi, I'm Lady Genevieve, and today's video will be the last spoiler-free review I do about Season 3 of The Boys. We'll see what happens for Season 4. It's still too early to know for sure what will happen, since I'm assuming it will be at least a year before it releases, but I'd assume there's a decent chance I will circle back around to talk more about the show whenever the new season airs. We have finally reached the finale, and if I do say so myself, it's a big one. Unsurprisingly, there are a lot of things I can't talk about from the episode because the list of do not reveals for this episode is very long. But as for what vague hints I can offer, I can happily share that we're going to see a lot of the major characters converging into a single location at a scale that I don't think we've seen before on the show. They're not going to do that thing where you went an entire episode without seeing Maeve. Everyone is present and accounted for to get some sort of continuation of what their stories have been across this season thus far. Black Noir and Maeve are some of the characters that have tended to be a little bit more outside of things. Black Noir because he's been mostly a mystery until very recently, and then Maeve has been hardly even in this season, but both of them have very memorable parts to play in this episode. That being said though, this episode, just in general, is stressful. Right from the beginning, the first scene had me stressed out. Get a blanket or get your designated rom-com on standby to play after this episode, because not only are you going to be going through it when you are watching, but you are then going to have to face an entire year or more before you get to see what comes next for the boys and the stories that are left open to further continuation. And actually, speaking of rom-coms, there is a rom-com shout out in this episode. I know. I didn't actually remember that this was in this episode until I rewatched it in order to work on my last episodic reviews for this season. But if you didn't already know this, I've been including mentions of rom-coms on and off all season. So to now get to this point and have a character name drop a rom-com in a way that wasn't degrading the rom-com or degrading rom-coms as a genre, it made me feel seen. Since they can't be bothered to appeal to me by letting their only Japanese character get her romantic endgame, we might as well at least appeal to me through my insistence that the rom-com needs to come back. There is also a passing mention of something in this episode that gives me a reason to talk about Gene Kelly in my spoiler review, and I'm very happy about that because I love Gene Kelly. I've talked about him on my channel before though. Iconic performer, I love his personal character, just a whole lot of hype for him, so any excuse to let the people know about the one and only Gene Kelly is much appreciated. But no matter what your feelings have been about this season so far, I think that in general there is a really satisfying payoff to the buildup of a lot of storylines and character arcs. Of course, there are certain details I have some stronger words for, but we will be able to get to all of that in my spoiler review. I know someone in my comments had said something about Victoria and how they were feeling like they expected more from her in this season because of the way that she had been introduced and used as a character before season 3. Without revealing the details, because it's 100% not allowed, you will get more clarity about what's going on with her in the season finale as a character. I've been very critical of Hughie this season, and I stand by all of that 100%. But what I will say is that someone says something to Hughie in this episode that I'm pretty sure is one of the funniest things I've heard said to him ever. And I don't say that just based on what is said to him, but because you don't expect it to come and then the person says it. I don't know, maybe others won't care. It's just a line mentioned in passing. It's not a conversation. There is action in this episode that we have been waiting years to see. Is it worth the wait? I think so. The action is multifaceted in the sense of which characters are fighting which characters, but there is a very specific fight that I personally have been wanting to see happen for a while, and I'm so glad that it finally does. There's also a verbal altercation in this episode that stood out a lot to me, but for very different reasons. It felt like the fight was siding with one character, but I found myself in total disagreement with that. The person being made to look like the wrong one in the fight, I don't think they really deserved for that exchange to play out the way that it did. But now let's get to some more of the heavy hitters that I tend to give more airtime to in my season 3 reviews. Starting things off with Kimchi. I'm not going to elaborate on this, but I did see a clip floating around on Twitter of an interview Karen Fukuhara did about this season, and in it she was talking about a scene that she really liked from this season between Kimiko and Frenchie where she helps him. If you've seen that interview, it should be obvious that it's going to happen in this episode simply because it has not happened in any of the other episodes of this season. So by process of elimination, it has to be happening in episode 8. Everything about how their dynamic plays out in this episode, of her helping him in the way that she helps him, and the payoff of it coming not that long afterwards, it is everything. I just want them to run off to Marseille already because they're in love, Eric Kripke, despite the lies that you're trying to spin that claim otherwise. Kimiko also has a music reference in this episode that is so good. I love how much more prevalent music has become in Kimiko's material this season, and the way music is used in episode 8 for her is fantastic. It's not another old school MGM musical. You're off by a few decades if that's your guess, but I loved it. Someone had better clip that part and put it on social media so it can go viral because it's what Kimiko deserves. Now, of course, we've got the matter of Jensen Ackles' Soldier Boy. The big reveal that came at the end of episode 7 is that Soldier Boy is Homelander's father. Now, I'm sure many of you are curious as to how that will develop. Will they get along with each other or will they not? Will they form an alliance or will they fight to the death? Well, there are a couple of very general points I can share about Soldier Boy's story for this episode. We've seen that he has this recurring habit of lying about what he has done, these so-called acts of heroism. This is the episode where we finally get to learn about Soldier Boy's backstory. It's not a flashback scene, and realistically, I don't think there would have been time for it. But on the bright side, you do get to see Jensen do a monologue sharing that backstory. I go back and forth about whether or not they should have had him share this information sooner. I suppose it could be out of character for him to open up so quickly to people he just met and formed a shaky alliance with so he could get his revenge on his former crew. But at the same time, for the sake of the audience, I do think it could have been nice to get that information sooner so we would be able to have a better understanding of who this character is sooner than we have. At the very least, it helps with doing a rewatch where you can have that context when you finish the season and want to go through the mess of it all over again. One thing that I do think is beneficial, though, is that because you get to hear him share this backstory in this episode, when that backstory is very deliberately referenced again in the episode, you have a more fresh impression, so you are less likely to have forgotten that it's a reference. In general, the way the storyline plays out in this episode of the aftermath of this Soldier Boy paternity revelation, it's very directly related to that thing I've repeatedly mentioned in these reviews of how Eric Kripke had said that this season is a meditation on toxic masculinity. I asked this in my last review, but I will mention it again. Does anyone want me to do an extra video summarizing and elaborating a little bit more on my thoughts on the Soldier Boy material? I think I've shared certain parts of it fairly well, but there are definitely other parts that I have not been able to discuss yet because of time, and also because not all of the episodes had aired. Since Soldier Boy is one of the main villains of this season, I'm pretty sure anyone and everyone could have predicted that he will have some big action sequence in the season finale, but the exact manner in which it plays out, the way that it escalates, I don't think would be as easy to predict. I saw some people sharing that they had already guessed before it was revealed on the show that Soldier Boy was Homelander's father. And that's a bit of nice sleuthing to those that did. But I personally had a really fun time watching this action play out. Overall, it's an excellent episode. It's going to be fun to talk about it in a spoiler review. I know this is a really quick upload, but there are just a lot of other things going on for me, and I'm scrambling trying to keep up with everything here on my channel on top of that. But if you liked this video, don't forget to like this video, comment your predictions or your hopes for the season 3 finale, and we will be back in a few days to talk about all of the spoilers, or at least as many as I can comfortably fit in before I decide I want to shorten the duration of the review. So I will see you in the next one. Bye.